Welcome. We have with us today Matt Rutter, a life coach and good friend of mine. Matt, before we get started, why don't you give our audience a little bit of background about yourself and what you do?
Sure. Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Ken. I really appreciate it. I appreciate this opportunity to talk with you and to speak with your audience. I am I'm a husband and a father. I'm a grandfather to five amazing grandkids, and I highly recommend that to any of you out there. Grandparenting is the best. It's great. I love to be out of doors. I love to be in the mountains on the seat of my mountain bike, and hiking around our beautiful Utah mountains. I'm born and raised in Utah, and I am a life coach now. It's an encore career, if you will. I spent about 25 years in technology, working from technical positions into sales and sales operations positions. And actually, I would come home to my wife, Kristen, who also happens to be a life, but I would come home from my corporate job. I loved my job, but I would come home often and I would say, is this all I am meant to be doing? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? And then about 4 years ago, I was turned on to coaching practice by my wife, and have been working in this arena for the last 3 years. But it's been an amazing journey, and I love doing what I'm doing, which is mostly just having conversations like this. So very fulfilling, and I love doing it.
Awesome. So let's start off with a few questions. When you work with a typical client, what's your main goal with that client? What do you
Mm.
hope to accomplish? What do you hope to help them with? Tell me a little bit about
Yeah, that's a great question, and I would say it's not so much my goal. It's about the goals that my client has, and being able to hold space, or being able to hold their goals without having my own goal necessarily. Because if I am worried about what I am wanting to accomplish in a particular session or with a particular client, I find that that gets in the way of maybe what my client really wants. And so I find a great deal of satisfaction in helping a client to be able to see that they are ultimately extremely capable of creating a life, creating outcomes, creating results that they truly want. So that really, if that makes sense, that
that's awesome.
so it's not so much something that I want to accomplish, but really helping my clients to be able to see that they can accomplish absolutely incredible, even transformational kinds of things that mean so much to them. That's a truly fulfilling thing.
My understanding is that most of your clients have been successful in their lives, but they want to find out more about what really matters to them, or they want to get more
Mm.
out of life than maybe what they have. How do you help them define what matters most?
Yeah, another great question. And it's probably one that we deal with, that I deal with. I would say with most every client. I do have some clients that come to me that say, "This is what I really want, and can you help me to get there?" And some clients come with certain agenda items or goals that they're wanting to accomplish, and um, we end up talking about something totally different, and that's okay too. But what I would say, I mean, it's like the what I mentioned earlier. When I worked in technology for a long time, but that really wasn't what I was truly wanting.
Mhm.
And it took me, and actually, as a follow up to that, my wife Kristen would say, "What do you want? What do you really want?" And I would say, "I don't know." And I would consider myself pretty self aware, I guess. And yet, trying to define it, it's kind of scary to say this is to actually put that down on paper, to say this is what I truly want. Because when you do that, you're kind of making a commitment, or you're either making a commitment or you're ignoring it
Yeah.
altogether. And so that was kind of a challenging process, but it involves a lot of self-reflection. For me, it involved like asking some very serious questions of myself. It involved journaling. It involved study. It involved prayer. It involved going inward and and also seeking wisdom from greater sources, seeking wisdom for me from God, seeking wisdom for from people that I trusted, but then finally it involved learning to trust what felt right for me as well. And that's a process. There is a process that we would go through, and writing exercises and meditative types of exercises. Not everybody that I talk to loves to write. Not everybody that I talk to loves to read. Not everybody that I talk to loves, is real hip on the idea of meditation or those kinds of things. And so the actual process might be different for different people, but I would say for every one of them, it involves some serious introspection.
In terms of that introspection, what are some of the questions that people need to ask themselves in trying to define what matters most?
I think just very simply, what do you want? It's interesting because I will ask that, and people can say, oftentimes people say, I just want to be happy, right? Or, I just want to feel satisfaction in my life. And there are some of those that pop to the surface just right off. And yet, is that what they really want? Do you really want to just be happy? Or is there something deeper than that? And so I will press on that further and further. This is a writing exercise sometimes that I will have people do, is I will ask them to write what you want, what you really, really, really want, and why do you want that? What areas of life are we talking about? As you're talking about what you really, truly want. And then oftentimes I will have them go back after that and write down, okay, how many of those things do you already have? And it's very interesting that much of what they have written down that they really want, they already have in some form or another. And it's an interesting thing to go through that. But there's more to that. But I believe that our desires come from a deeper place. Our desires come from a deeper source. And some of my desires I know are God given, or I believe that they are God given. And so being able to recognize that as a God given desire is a little bit more motivational than, the latest trend in cars or homes or whatever.
Awesome. Now, I know you have this concept of what you call Wealth 360 and
Mm.
helping people redefine what true prosperity is. Tell me little bit about that concept and
Yeah.
true prosperity.
You know what, Ken? Thank you for asking about that. That's a concept that has kind of, when I say wealth 360, it has felt like a stewardship for me, kind of something that I feel like I want, something that I feel like a dialogue, a discussion that needs to go out. I worked for 25 years, like grinding and trying to build a prosperous prosperity for my family. And truth be told, a lot of it was financial. Now, I had parents that taught me that there is a lot more to life than financial wealth. And so, I don't mean to say that this is something that has been too challenging. And yet, oftentimes, I would be putting work above other priorities. I'd be putting, you know, making money above other priorities. And there are times, there are seasons, there are fluctuations, and there is a balance that we're all trying to strike, right? And we're we're trying to do that, but so often, especially in today's world, we look at success very often in terms of what it looks like materially, or what it looks like from a career perspective, or what it looks like from a bank account perspective. And this concept is simply the idea that true prosperity is way bigger than the number in a bank account or in a mutual fund account or a retirement account. I'll give you an example. We went on a little vacation. We were on a vacation with our daughter, son-in-law, and our first grandson. He was about 2 years old at the time, a year and a half or 2 years old at the time. And it was an amazing vacation. We were in Amsterdam and we were staying in a working windmill. And it was out in the middle of the tulip fields. It was a beautiful, beautiful place and just amazing environment. And yet, the thing that I remember about that more than anything else, and the thing that brings the most joy to me from that, was in the evening, our little 2-year-old grandson running back and forth between my wife and I, just like falling, laughing, deliriously happy as he ran and fell into our arms. You know, my wife sitting on one side of the room and me on the other. And that for me is an element of Wealth 360. It's 360 degrees. We want it in all of the most important areas of our life. We want it in relationships. We want it spiritually. Our souls crave that spiritually, relationally, physically. Being able to experience that from an emotional and a mental perspective. So it's not about the money, but it's also not about the money as well.
Mhm.
Because we live in a time and a place where it does take money to live.
Are there any other key areas of the Wealth 360 that you didn't mention?
Great question. And I think that there are going to be areas that might be extremely important to you that may not be as important to me. There are certain pillars, if you will, but certainly relationships, being a part of something greater, a a spiritual connection as well as connection with people and community around you, mission, or purpose. Again, physical health, career might be part of it. I think it's a big part of life. So being involved in a career that feels like has a purpose. There are probably other things that are very important for other people, and so I think really the idea is that those are pillars that probably people will need to look at spending time to define for themselves. I would ask someone what feels like true prosperity to you and just let them start talking.
Awesome. And you've kind of talked a little bit about this already, but as you know, I'm a writer. There's this thing that most writers know about called, internal and external plots, and the main plot often is associated with, what does this main character really want to achieve?
Mm.
What is their goal? What is their objective? And as they go through the story, what happens quite often is the character decides that what they thought they wanted isn't what they really want. They really want something
Mm.
else, and it's part of this character growth. Is that something that you run into as you work with clients? That they think they want something, but as you work with them, you help them realize, oh, I really want something else. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, that is uh, and probably the reason something like that resonates in writing so much is because everybody deals with that,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, so 100%, I agree with that completely, and I do see that. I think it's very rare that I will work with somebody exclusively on what they came to me for in the first place,
Mhm.
because we always find that all of life is interconnected. And if you're struggling in a relationship at home, that is going to affect all other areas, or most. I would say all other areas of life, even if it's in small ways. And if you're struggling at work, then it bleeds over into relationships at home and bleeds into physical, what you're dealing with physically, and what you're dealing with mentally. And I have a client that came to me because he was struggling in a leadership role in his company and struggling with communication and how he led his teams. And it was pretty interesting to see how that kind of played out in at home and in relationships with children, and so it's all interconnected, I think. So yeah, I think that is a great that's a great metaphor for life. I think we all, as we dig deeper, um, we find that there are areas that we didn't think were a problem, that we can actually, that there is certainly area for improvement.
Is there any general advice you'd give someone to help them, figure that out, figure out, what really is going to bring me happiness, or what is it that I really want, or what am I missing? I think I want this, but this other thing is really going to help me more. Is there
Mm.
any advice or guidance that, and I know that's, kind of all I'm putting you on the spot here, but is there some general advice you'd give there?
Uh, yeah. Um, and we hear this. I'm sure you've probably heard this before, but keep your whole self planted where your feet are. Um, So be present in the place that you are right now. We live in a world where there is so much opportunity for distraction. We hold in our hands, we hold in our pockets an instrument that can allow us to be distracted 24/7 if we want it.
Mhm.
And and quite often we don't want to feel what we are currently feeling. And so we'll open up a phone and look at something to avoid feeling something that feels a little bit uncomfortable to us. So actually, there would be the piece of advice. Get good at feeling uncomfortable for a moment and allow that feeling to pass or question that feeling. I notice I'm feeling a little bit anxious. Why is that? And actually leaning into that feeling as opposed to trying to avoid that feeling. Try to discover what that feeling is trying to tell us, what that emotion or what that even a physical sensation in your body. Get used to a little bit of discomfort. And as you get good at feeling that, you know that you can do it in a safe way. It's not going to hurt you to feel uncomfortable. It's not going to you're not going to be in danger feeling discomfort. So that was off the cuff, but
That's great.
anyway.
What role does gratitude have in your as you work with different clients?
Oh man, gratitude is a very powerful emotion. And actually, this goes very well with what we were just talking about. There are powerful emotions and there are, I would call them primal emotions. Fear, anxiety, self-doubt, discouragement, loathing. You could name dozens of those. And actually, I'll ask you a question. When you, as a writer, when you feel maybe you've never had writer's block or felt resistance to on a project that you were working on, but what are the feelings what are the emotions that come up for you when you're struggling to write something that you feel like you need to write?
Oh, there'd be, frustration, anxiousness, those types of feelings.
Yeah, yeah. And frustration and anxiousness, I would categorize as those primal type emotions. On the other hand, when you're feeling excitement, when you're feeling encouraged, when you're feeling love, when you're feeling gratitude, you are in a place to be able to create more powerfully. And that's what gratitude does. Gratitude allows you, love allows you, excitement allows you to be able to create from a more powerful place. And I will tell you this will be, if there's anything that your listeners listen to today that I think can be extremely powerful for them, it would be this. When you recognize that you are feeling one of those primal emotions like fear, like anxiousness, like frustration. Um, what we have found is that those kinds of emotions are generated by a belief or a thought that we have that is untrue. And if you just let that sink in for a moment, if you are believing something that is untrue, you're going to feel some kind of emotion like that, that puts you in a state of fear, anxiety, doubt, discouragement. And if that is untrue, if what you are believing that is causing that kind of emotional experience for you, if that thought or that belief you have is untrue, then some form of the opposite of that must be true. And if you can then identify a, a few sources of evidence of that new, a true belief, then you will be able to rewire that circuit and allow yourself to believe a new truth about or a truth about that particular circumstance. So, I guess recognize that you're in a primal state, acknowledge that the belief that you have is untrue, and if untrue, then what is true about that? And then find a couple of pieces of evidence of that truth, and that will help you to be able to get into a more powerful state, a state of belief, a state of love, a state of gratitude, a state of excitement, encouragement, and so forth. So that is how gratitude can play. Gratitude is a powerful emotion, and it can help us to get into a powerful state that allows us to be able to live, create, and love in a much more empowered way.
Wonderful. In addition to gratitude, I understand that one of your objectives is to help clients shift from this scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset through gratitude, service, and faith. Tell me a little bit about that.
Gratitude helps you to be in the here and now. Right here, right now, I am sitting in a comfortable chair. I'm talking with you, and we're having this discussion that feels energizing to me. And it's a beautiful day outside. I can see the sun shining through this basement window that I'm sitting next to. And I have heat that is keeping me comfortable from a physical perspective. I have, I'm going to see my grandkids after we get done. There is, it's not just for those of us who are able to do this, but abundance is the world around us. And you've heard of confirmation bias, perhaps, the idea that you find what you're looking for. Actually, it's been an interesting experiment for me because over the last about a month or so since I have been working, as I've been looking for opportunities to find this wealth 360, to see this wealth 360 concept in my life. It is everywhere that I look. It's everywhere that I look. And and I think that's part of it as well, is being able to see what is there. I My wife put an audiobook in just this last week, and it's written by a Korean journalist. That the book is called The Having. An interesting concept, and it's about becoming rich. They talk about, I thought at some point in the book they were going to actually be talking about wealth. The concepts that they talk about in this book do reflect a wealth 360 type mentality, but they just talk about money. And that's okay. That's what they were talking about, and it's what they talk about in this. But it is about the idea of truly experiencing what you have. And I love that concept. It's about being grateful for what we already have does not necessarily mean that we don't want to experience more, but we're not attached to more. We don't need to expect, okay, I'm being grateful now. It's time for me to be blessed with more. But it's just being in that idea, that mindset of being grateful just as it is. And there is beauty in that. There's amazing beauty in that. And at the same time, we don't have to be attached because I believe that God wants to give us all, in my particular faith tradition, we in scripture that I have read, it talks about God wanting to give us all that he has. And am I willing to be a recipient of that? I want to learn to be a recipient of the whole life experience of the abundant life. That's another term that that comes out of Christian scripture, right? That Christ came that we might have life and that we might have it more abundantly. And I think to think of abundant life, money's certainly not the first thing that comes to mind for me in that particular metaphor.
I'm going to put you on the spot again. A friend asked me to ask you this question.
Oh, all
So,
right.
so I said, how do you come to grips with accepting that you're old and that many of your dreams and aspirations will likely never come to pass?
Mhm.
How would you respond to that?
Mhm. So I've had a couple of conversations similar to this. In fact, I had lunch with an old high school classmate just this last Friday, and we were talking. He's successful in a job that he has. It's not necessarily his ideal job, and yet the the question came up. First of all, the question came up like, are we? Is this it? Is this what we're destined for? And what I would say is, um, as long as we have one breath left, we can breathe that breath with the purpose that feels like our purpose. There may be dreams and aspirations. I remember, so 3 years after I was born was when man first set foot on the moon. And I, probably like many of the kids that grew up in my era, I wanted to be an astronaut. And I was visiting my daughter back in Washington, D.C. a couple of years ago, and I went to the Smithsonian Institute, and the Neil Armstrong spacesuit that he was wearing when he set foot on the moon was on display. And standing there next to it was a visceral, emotional experience for me. I felt that very, very deeply, and I remembered that. And yet, I remembered that I loved, the idea of being an astronaut as a young person, so a little boy, and yet that is a dream that, and maybe I will. maybe I still will go to space. You never know nowadays. Things like that might happen. But what I would say to that person, I would say, what are your dreams now? And I would start by doing something similar to what we talked about in the beginning. Um, what is it that you really truly want now? And why? And where is that desire coming from? And we all have we all have purpose. There are still desires that can bring out the very best in us, no matter our age, no matter where we are at in life. But I would tell that person to start looking at what it is right now that they want, um, because life's not over. Life's not over until we run out of breath, and but continue to dream even when you're 58 years old like me. And I'm still dreaming. I'm still traveling this path right now. Having a discussion like this is a step on that journey, and using that model of sorts that I described earlier. If there is something that is telling you, if there's something that is creating a sadness or a regret, then start looking at the thought that is causing that sadness or regret, and how is that untrue? And what other thought is true? And maybe even just start there. How is it untrue that my dreams are unattainable? And what might I want to dream going forward? Chances of me setting foot on the moon are probably not great. And yet I have many things, there are many dreams that are important to me, that there are many that feel like, wow, this feels like a stretch. Can I really do this? And yet I can take a step today.
As you've been talking, one of the thought that's come to my mind is, a lot of this discussion at least seems to me, and you can correct me if you feel otherwise, but a lot of it is about really just discovering for ourselves what the true sources of happiness are for us. What are those things that really will bring us joy? And and that's kind of this quest for truth, quest of, you know, is it really money that's going to bring me happiness? Is it relationships? Is it how I treat other people? Is it um, my perspective? Um, what what is the source of true joy in my life, or the sources of true joy? And focusing more on those than kind of what you refer to as these untruths of what we're feeling or thinking. Does that kind of resonate with you?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I definitely think that's an accurate way to describe it.
Okay. Well, we're almost out of time. I think you've answered this question already, but I'm going to just ask it again. If there is one thing you want viewers to get out of this conversation, what would it be?
Mm. We have been all over the place, Ken. I feel like we've gone a we've gone a lot of different directions, but I what I would say is that that every one of us is capable, every one of us is able to enjoy an abundant life. And an abundant life is going to look differently. Wealth 360 is going to look different for different people, and that's okay. But there is wealth 360 to be had for everyone. And like I say, it looks different for every different person, but I do believe that we live in a world of abundance, and I love to be a part of seeing that happen with people that I talk to every day. I'm just grateful for that.
Last question. How does your faith or
Mm.
your belief system impact what you do and how you live your life?
I actually have a document that I call my declaration of who I am. Some of the points on there are, you know, beliefs that I hold very strongly. Some of them are aspirational things that I am working to become in my life. The very first bullet on that document says that I am a son of divine, loving, heavenly parents that are intimately involved in the details of my life. And that's a basis from which I feel like that's a basis of strength for me. So I feel like that faith, that belief, it is foundational for me. It is a foundation that from which I live. That's it's a very, very powerful part of how I live my life and how I approach my stewardship as a coach, as a mentor, as a husband and a father and a grandfather and an uncle and a friend. It is a deep part of who I am.
Thank you so much for taking time with me today, Matt. This has been great. If people want to in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
So I do have a landing page website. I don't have a lot on my website, but mattruttercoaching.com. I am typically active on LinkedIn. I post sometimes on Instagram as well.
Great. Well, thank you again. This has been a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Ken. I appreciate being able to have this conversation with you.